This morning, we're continuing our commitment connecting you to Congress, especially as the Trump administration continues to downsize the workforce of the federal government. To learn more about the impacts to Central Oregon, we're joined live by Oregon Congressman Cliff Bentz. He represents Oregon's 2nd Congressional District. Good morning, Congressman.
Good morning, Matthew.
Well, thanks for joining us this morning. Let's get right into it. At a recent town hall here in Oregon, community members shared their concerns with you over spending cuts being done at the federal level. Following that town hall, you told ABC News that, quote, "We need to address issues now," end quote. You also told ABC News you are in support of shrinking the federal government. What are you doing to reassure your constituents that as the Trump administration works to shrink the size of the federal government, they will still have the services they need?
Well, thank you for the question. I always remain amazed at how the press fails to set the scale of change and emphasizes the reductions without ever mentioning the total number of people involved. So we have about 2.6 million total federal employees across the United States, not counting the military, not counting the post office. 2.5 million. The discussions have been to reduce that workforce by 10%. Discussions, that has not happened. And what is happening is a careful review with that as a target. In my district, Oregon Congressional District 2, there's about 7,000 folks that work for the federal government. So if you looked at 10% of that, it would be 700. So when people are saying you're gutting the federal government or you're destroying the federal government or you're ruining the federal government, I would say, wait a minute, we're talking a maximum of 10% in most cases, or maybe more in places where we find way more bloated conditions than people think might be the case across the board. But in the general term, it's going to be somewhere around 10%. But it hasn't happened yet. What we're trying to do is work our way toward that goal in a careful way. All you'll hear about on the press is you're ruining it, and part of this is driven by other politicians. I think my friend Jeff Merkley is probably one of the more vociferous folk when it comes to what we're trying to do. But I would just try to put it in perspective.
All right, well, thank you for that clarity. This next question is about Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. All three programs have made national headlines since the Trump administration took office. Are these programs going to be protected from cuts? And if there are cuts, what is your message to the people who will be impacted?
Well, the first thing I would say is that these programs are indispensable lifelines for literally tens of millions of people. So whatever we do in those spaces, we're going to do with great care and do our best to protect those who those programs are supposed to protect, whether it's pregnant women or whether it's seniors, whether it's people with disabilities, children. What we're doing our best is to make sure these programs are protected. What folks don't seem to understand, and for good reason, because my Democrat colleagues are engaging in what was called 30 years ago meta-scare tactics. They're trying to scare people. And what they need to do, all of us need to do, is look at the fact that these programs are dramatically essential and need to be protected. We cannot let them be overfunded to people that aren't deserving under these programs, folks that are cheating or fraudulently taking money from these programs. And the workforce that's helping implement these programs need to be looked at also. But just so folks know, in about 9 years, the Social Security Administration's reserve account will be exhausted. There won't be a reserve account anymore. We're using that reserve all the time now to supplement the amount of money that's coming in. And so when that reserve account is exhausted 8 or 9 years from now, if we don't do something, people's Social Security benefit will be reduced by 20%. We don't want that to happen. Let me make that clear. We don't want that to happen. So the question is, how do we address things now while we still have the luxury of at least 8 or 9 years and then try to fix it? Well, the reason it hasn't been fixed before is because everybody knew that we would see this kind of response. Every Democrat running around hair on fire, yelling about how we were trying to gut the program, when in point of fact, we're trying to do the exact opposite.
I see. Thanks for that insight on that. Last question for you. You are on two committees, the House Natural Resource Committee and the House Committee on Energy and Commerce. Within the House Natural Resources Committee, what are you doing to protect and preserve Oregon's wildlife and open spaces and just overall environment?
Well, I'm happy to report. Thank you for the question on natural resources, and the probably best example of what we're trying to do, and I'm working on a bipartisan basis with Senator Wyden and have been for literally years to try to arrange things in a way that will allow us to do a bill. And I think we're going to agree on Monday on the bill that will address the Owyhee Canyon lands. There's been much talk by folks wanting a monument. A monument would be bad for the land, and I'm quoting folks from Oregon State University, scientists that I know, who have called out the fact that a monument would be bad for the land. So we're working on a different approach that will protect literally millions of acres and for the future, into the future. So I'm proud of that work, and the local community deserves to be proud of that. So that's just one thing that we're doing. The other thing, though, in the Natural Resource Committee is to try to protect our forests from these horrific fires. And the way you do it is by making sure you remove the vast amounts of fuel that have built up over the past 30 or 40 years in a way that that helps the environment, preserves the forest, but reduces the chance of wildfire. So I'm happy that the Fix Our Forest Act I'm a co-leader on that bill, and I'm very happy to be a sponsor, and I look forward to getting that bill passed.
Well, Congressman, we really appreciate you taking the time to join us live and answer these questions from your constituents. Do you have any other comments you would like to share with our viewers?
Matthew, I just want to thank you for giving me the opportunity, and I want to re-emphasize that people, please do what you're doing now. Listen to folks that are actually working on trying to save these important programs, whether it's Medicare, Social Security, Medicaid, and please don't, surrender to the I'll call it blather we hear from certain Democrats regarding what we're doing, and we're trying to save these programs.
All righty. Well, thank you so much for joining us. We will be right back, folks.